You don't need your radio or your PC to listen to Peterborough FM. Use your smartphone instead. Just use your browser and connect to www.peterborough.fm and click Listen Live.
Peterborough FM, the station that listens to you.
Hello and welcome to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin, a show where we go deep into the rabbit hole. You can catch me every other Wednesday evening from 9 here on Peterborough FM and online. If you want to learn more about me, please visit my website at valentinesaintaubin.co.uk. You can also listen to the archives of the show on my website as well. So it's the 30th of November 2011, and we're in a Mercury retrograde, in case you don't know. How do we know? Well, have you been having computer problems? I mean, I personally never do well during Mercury retrograde phases because I am a Gemini, and Mercury rules the planet, the sign of Gemini. So for myself, I always find Mercury retrograde periods to be quite difficult, and this one, I have to say, is a mega retrograde phase. I've had a car accident, I've had computer problems, I've had to exchange a brand new mobile phone for another mobile phone, and I'm still having problems with it. I've had about every technical issue that you can have with an electronic device go wrong. And, well, we're still in the phase. It's going to be around with us for a couple of more weeks. Not until about Christmas time will things be settling down. So, well, I have to say, if you're having problems like myself, you're going to have to just take very deep breaths. It will end, and life will resume back to normal. I always find with Mercury retrograde that you can actually feel the energy turn inside out. No one ever seems to know what the other person has just said. There's a lot of miscommunication because, you know, Mercury is the planet of communication. He was the only god that was allowed to go amongst the gods in heaven and also down into the underworld. So when Mercury isn't feeling very well, everything gets chaotic. So this is a very important phase. It happens about 3 times a year. And this is going to be the last one for this year, and then we will be having one towards the beginning of next year, around I think February time in 2012. So it will get better. It will get better in time for Christmas. So there is good news ahead. So, well, it's safe to say that the energies have been revved up out there. I have spent the last couple of weeks feeling absolutely lethargic and unable to really accomplish anything of any use. I think it has gotten better this week. That's my opinion. I have been able to focus a bit better, even though Mercury is retrograde. But the energies have been very, very brutal. There's a lot of emotional energy bouncing around out there. and this will continue to intensify as Uranus and Pluto get ever closer towards their first square, which will happen next year. And this is going to be a very interesting transit, a very difficult transit, and the energies have been building. All you have to do is look at the news. You can see how things are turning quite restless and aggressive. Well, that's Uranus and Pluto kicking off with one another. So things are going to get quite animated on the world scene, and also in our own lives as we walk through the eye of the needle with these upcoming years of 2012. Well, from 2012 going into 2016 especially, there are going to be very intense energies. So if you are sensitive to energies like I am, and if you're sensitive to other people's energy fields, it's important that you do take time to relax and take time for yourself to detach, because everybody's going to be heightened. The drama levels are going to be extremely high, higher than they usually are, and you're going to think everybody's have lost their mind. I mean, you can see already, and it's only going to intensify. Much of this volatility is, as I said, due to the upcoming square between Pluto and Uranus. Pluto is currently at 5 degrees Capricorn, and Uranus is at 0 degrees Aries, and it's actually retrograde as well. It will be turning direct before the end of this year. So all of these movements that we're seeing, you know, the Occupy Wall Street movements, everything that we've seen during the course of this year, they will get new energy and they will be revitalized, and we're going to see a lot more demonstrations taking place, and they're going to probably get quite a bit aggressive come next year. So at the moment it's quiet because Uranus has been retrograde, but things are going to kick up again as it does turn direct. So these are the themes that we're going to be seeing for the next few years. We've already seen the Occupy movement being evicted out of the Wall Street area in the United States, and they were evicted in a very violent way, a very aggressive way. So it's only a matter of time before people start taking things back into their hands and start speaking up for themselves once again. And what happened today? Well, today we had the biggest protest movement in the UK for about 85 years. Almost 2 million people got onto the streets in London. People that you wouldn't expect, people that work within the public service, people who are teachers, doctors, those types of individuals on the street demonstrating, upset about their pensions being slashed and the amount of money that they have to pay into their pension schemes, and just the loss of their whole what they signed up for when they did become a teacher or a nurse. All of their rights, their earned rights, their working rights being sort of taken away from them. So these people, took to the streets today. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of this in 2012. And as I say, 2012 is going to be a very interesting year. I'm not afraid of it. I'm quite looking forward to it. Anytime people awaken, I think it's a good thing. So I know personally that I'm quite eager to see the astrology playing itself out and how people take back their rights and their emotions, because it's about time that we begin to have a voice again. So Uranus and Pluto are due to square off about 7 times from 2012 to 2015. That's quite a long period for transit. The first square will be in June 2012, and as I have been saying, the energy already is quite chaotic. But as the square tightens, as we get closer to June 2012, the energy will become even more chaotic. And squares always bring things up to the surface, and they force us to take action in some way. So, the world stage is going to get very hectic, and it is important that we all keep our heads. Protesting violently will only allow those in power to take more of our rights away, as this is what they want. So you do have to be careful here. But creating intelligent movements and using the law, now that's the key word, using the law, is where we need to turn our focus. So get educated on that front. So the last time Uranus and Pluto squared one another was in the period between 1932 to 1934. And so let's think back through the annals of time, what was going on during that period. And, well, we were experiencing the Great Depression. Kel surprise is back, even though they have been trying to say that it's not here. But we do know that the markets are very depressed and recovery is very slow. Well, basically what we have been witnessing is a collapse in the Western world, not necessarily globally, but definitely in the Western world, in the Western countries. The other thing that was going on during this time period was that that Nazism was on the rise, with Hitler coming into power in Germany, and fascism was beginning to take hold, with characters like Mussolini asserting themselves during this time period. So it's always important to know your history. And it's always good to know your astrological history. So we are due, people, for some very difficult years ahead. There's no doubt about that. So you're going to have to keep your eyes open, get yourself educated with your rights, which you're entitled to, and be very careful of how you want to address things in the public, because they're sitting back waiting for people to make a nuisance of themselves so that they can take more and more of our rights away. So we have to be very, very careful here. So, we are in very important times, and the Hopi Indians talk about the years that we're in right now as being the years of great purification. People are expecting great things to happen in 2012, as everybody is excited about this great shift in consciousness coming to mankind. But the truth is, as I've said, these years are going to be very hard, as you do not get change without effort. And change is not always easy to endure. So tonight I have a great guest. We tried to have our interview on the last show, and we had all sorts of technical difficulties. So somebody out there didn't want us to actually connect and have Roy say all the wonderful things that he did get to say during the last show, although it was very short and sweet. So he's back again tonight, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation. So my guest tonight is Roy Dutton, and he's the author of a fantastic book called UFOs in Reality. He's been researching the movements of what he has termed strange aerial craft since 1967, so for about 43 years now, and it's led him to develop what he's called the astronautical theory, which is a scientific theory based on years of research and global data. So, he's a very intelligent man, and he's got one heck of a brain on his shoulders, I have to say. I've read his book. It's fantastic. So it's going to be a very interesting show, so do sit back and enjoy. But we're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, hopefully, we will be joined by Roy. So we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, we're back here with me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin. Well, we have already had a few technical gremlins, but I've got Roy on the line. I'm just going to check his mic, make sure that he's still with us. Roy, you there?
Yes, I'm
Hello. Here. Welcome to the show. We've made it this time.
We've lost 20 minutes of it as well.
I know. Well,
okay, anyway, let's get started.
Let's get started. I mean, we have to let's give a bit of a background as to who you are and what you've done, because there seems to be whoever's out there watching us, watching you, wants us to know that they're watching you, because what you have to offer is very important. What you have to say is very important, and that's the way that I'm understanding it. It's like they're trying to say to us, we know that the guest that you have tonight is someone who is of immense importance, and we're going to let you know that we know. So let's talk about your background. We did talk slightly last week, but we didn't really give a proper introduction as to how you got involved in all of this research. So let's talk about your professional life, and let's go into the interview from that direction.
Okay, I'll try and keep this bit brief, really. I spent 37 years in the aircraft industry, aerospace industry, actually. And I began my career in studying feasibility studies on advanced spacecraft and missiles and things of that sort. And I got a crash course in astronautics, which is the science of flight in space, if anyone is not familiar with that term. Now, shortly, about 4 years into that, we had a change of management, and we were closed down. And so I then moved across to Hawker Siddeley Aviation, and joined the wind tunnels department, because I wanted to stay at that site.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I was in this situation in 1967 when a lot of sightings of strange craft were coming in from the Manchester area, the greater Manchester area. And I decided that, since flying machines were my business, that I want to know more about these. So I said, I'll collect I decided to collect the information from the newspapers and to do a sort of comparison to try to find commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
And I did find commonalities, and I did find information, the information from the people who were making these reports, that they were, in fact, quite terrified by the things which were hovering low over their housetops, and with multicolored lights, and or perhaps even glowing all over in the dark. And they were spooked by it all. So I thought, well, whatever these things are, they seem to be real. But, they obviously need to be regarded as not being able to be, they're not going to be our products. People speculating, about secret craft.
Yeah, like the Nazis building spaceships and things like that.
About, and they were saying they could be some secret craft from our research departments, you see. And I knew this was just nonsense. They certainly wouldn't test new craft, experimental craft, over houses.
Right.
So, in any case. So anyway, shortly afterwards, I got information from Stoke-on-Trent area in Staffordshire that the same things were happening there. And I obtained a report the following year which had been compiled by 2 amateur astronomers in Stoke-on-Trent. And I ordered a copy of this, and I found it was a very good source of information. So I started to analyze all the information I got, all the craft that had been reported to me, and to do drawings of, the lighting configurations and things like that, to see if I could make any sense of them. Mm-hmm. Now, all this is in the book, of course, I've explained how it all started like that. And, of course, then I did decided they were real, or seemed to be real, but I needed to know what they were doing. So I then analysed, or did a survey of the places in Britain where they had been concentrating their attentions. And they were mostly in the northwest at that time, in 1967, the latter part of 1967. And they appeared to be clustering around the newly opened M6 motorway, which was only from Preston in the north to Stafford in the Midlands at that time. And all the rest of it was still being built, and all the flyovers and to the cities and towns were being built.
Right.
So it was making a big commotion on the countryside, which I think I thought, well, that might be attracting them. And then I then did an analysis to see what kind of places they were visiting.
Right.
And then I discovered that they were new developments generally, housing estates and motorways, flyovers and things of that sort, but very close to ancient sites.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Within a mile of the witness.
Yeah.
I looked for locations within a mile of the witness. These were generally close encounters of the sort that, not the close encounters of third and fourth kind, that they were close. The people were able to describe the craft they'd been
what they were seeing,
observing. So it just led on from there to after about 6 years of it. Oh, I did a fireball investigation as well. There was some during that period, in that 6-year period, there were numerous fireball events reported, fuzzballs really in the sky, plasma balls, gaseous-looking things glowing, but they had no tail, like a comet, or they had no. They manoeuvred about quite often, and lit up the countryside. So I thought, well, whatever they are, they seem to be under control, but they're not strange aerial craft, which was my reason for looking at them, you see. So I decided to make them a separate study. And then after I have done that, and confirmed after 6 years, confirmed that the same sort of craft were being reported over that period of time, then it seemed to me that if they were coming from the sky, they were going back into the sky, and space was the obvious source of them, you see.
Yeah.
So I then wanted a global database, international database, from which I could sort of survey the whole world from space.
Right.
And that I was very fortunate in being able to access two major catalogues. I chose from those two catalogues, 450 good events, things that fitted my criteria.
And what was the criteria that you were looking for at the time?
Yes, I was looking for technology, obviously, things that seem to be objects created by technology we didn't seem to have.
Moving in ways that we possibly couldn't create anything to move in certain ways and do certain things. So
I then had to find ways of processing all these events. As I actually narrowed it down to 450 out of a couple of thousand or something like that in the listings. And then I tried to look for links between them on the globe. And that led me to eventually to some remarkable discoveries, because I found that they were not, although they were not linked very obviously on the globe. If I did a survey relative to the stars, in other words, discovered which stars were overhead at the time when the event on the ground occurred. When I did that exercise, then I found there were connections in space, and that defined sort of favored paths, as if they'd come on favored paths to the Earth.
So may I ask, Roy, what you were finding was that there were certain paths that these strange aerocraft were using, and they were using the certain stars within our solar system as markers, as guiding stars?
Well, that was a later discovery, really.
Okay.
The first discovery was that there were very well-defined paths or links between the sightings in space, as if they were using a particular orientation against the star field to come in and access the Earth below. So they came out of that two main paths in space. Couldn't define them. But when we looked at I looked at the distribution on the Earth, I then discovered that by using the information I'd got from the starfield exercise, that there were in fact paths over the Earth which linked up the locations on the Earth, on the Earth below.
Mm-hmm.
And from that came a kind of network of paths over the Earth which seemed to be fixed and fixed to the equator. There were markers on the equator, and they were generating through those sites on the equator. So from this was generated this idea that it was all very well organized and had been planned a long time ago. So when they came in from space on their favored paths, they then latched onto one of these paths over the ground, and to get to the site they were interested in. Mm-hmm. Now, another interesting feature of this was that it seemed almost as if they were dropping things from space on the path, the motherships, if you like, coming in from space, were dropping things onto one of these tracks from up in space, and then they disappeared off into space, and the craft that came down into the atmosphere were in fact the UFOs that people saw.
Were these kind of like drones then? Is that what the hypothesis was that you were?
Well, it was rather like what the Americans did on the moon, really. You know, they had the little LEM that landed the men down on the moon, and another one went round and round in orbit, waiting to retrieve them again. And that seemed to be the pattern that was developing. And, it just developed more and more from there. And I eventually managed to formulate all this in the form of a theory, an astronautical theory. And then, much later, I was able to computerize it all, so that we could check out the timings of the date. I needed the date, the location, the GPS location of the event, and the time of the event, into fairly good accuracy, sort of within 10 minutes sail when it was first spotted. And and then to see how that fitted this system that I devised.
It's very interesting that you use those specific things to, quantify your theory, because the date, time, and location is exactly what an astrologer needs to use when they're looking at someone's birth chart, marked against, the stars. So you were finding, when you knew the date, the time, and location, you could also map out when a visitation would be expected, or when there would be movement with one of these strange aerial craft coming to a certain site. Is that correct?
Well, the time really had to be linked to the time in the stars.
Yeah.
The sidereal time.
Yeah.
And that's how the theory works. Now, it has occurred to me that this may have been how the early astronomers were astrologers.
Yes, they were astrologers. People don't realise that, but they were.
Because perhaps whenever the stars or planets were in a particular configuration in the sky, they may have noticed that the gods gave them a visit, you see. Something like that.
Yes.
So it could well be that how they came to create the science of astrology. And it grew, of course, into all sorts of things after that, to determine people's fates and all that sort of thing, which I could never understand.
Yeah.
But that's the basics of the work I did, by just careful and deliberate analysis and synthesis of building together all the facts that came out of these exercises I did. So now, since then, that was all built up initially manually, using graph paper and goodness knows what, and tracing paper, using those 450 events.
Which is quite a lot of information to be going through.
So
it's not something that can be done in a year, obviously not. So.
Well, this is why it's taken so long.
Yes.
Basically. Why it took me so long to actually come up with this sort of refined, as I call it, refined theory, astronautical theory. It took so long because I was having to do it in my own time, some spare time, and when some people were sort of going home and doing the crossword puzzles, I'd be puzzling about the latest UFO patterns. So that's basically what it's about.
Okay.
But what's happened, of course, in the development of this, I mean, I then checked up with people, went to visit people who'd had strange
Yes,
events.
I was going to ask you about these, yes.
And those, of course, are in the book as well, some of them. I found that some remarkable things in those circumstances. And one of the classic ones, actually, the one that really impressed me, was the two women in Shropshire who had with a third member of their party, had a close encounter of the fourth kind and had an abduction situation. That during hypnosis, they said they had been shown a map to tell them where these things had come from, you see, where these creatures had come from. And I was keen to get this map. I was sitting in on the hypnosis. And, well, after about 3 sessions, I managed to persuade them to draw what they'd been shown. And again, their drawings are in the book. Now, one of them was very much looked very much like constellations,
right.
Dots. And but when I looked at the star map, I mean, there's no obvious link there until one night I couldn't see any constellations that looked like these. This cluster that had been drawn by one of the people, one of the women. And then I looked out the window one night and saw the Pleiades coming up over the trees.
Right.
And I thought, well, I've seen that before. I got my binoculars on. It was virtually the same as one of the patterns that this woman under hypnosis had produced. And she had no knowledge, astronomical knowledge at all, apparently. Had not had any astronomical knowledge or been interested in UFOs before. So the fact that there was a Pleiades involved in this picture hadn't registered with them at first. And, of course, the Pleiades has figured a lot in the UFO law.
Yes, they tend to do a lot of visitations, from what I understand. Yeah.
So it seemed, and all the other constellations. Once I discovered those that was the Pleiades, then I was able to recognize the other star patterns. If I allowed it to change scale. In fact, so that because they did say, or one of them did say, well, everything's changing scale. It seems to be changing scale. Mm-hmm. So they were looking at something like a hologram, really, a hole in the wall, and trying to describe these things that they were seeing.
Right. Okay.
Now, to me, that was a major kind of breakthrough, because here we were getting two women who were not interested in astronomy and had not had any sort of UFO law soak, who were coming up with this remarkable drawing. And I have expressed that to you in the book. But there are so many aspects of that kind involving people that it's very difficult for me to try to describe them in such a short time period, because I have to recommend people buy the book, please, and see it all for themselves, because I want people to know about these discoveries, and to be able to discuss it with people. I'm not trying to sort of brainwash them into thinking certain things. I want them to do the exercise as I've done it, which is with a completely open mind, to find out where it was all leading.
What I found interesting about your book when I was reading it was one of the stories that you recounted was when you were asked for an interview by the BBC. I think you were working at the time, and you went on your lunch break to a site to look at a crop circle that had formed or something like that.
Crop ring, yes.
Yes, and you spent a lot of time trying to explain everything. You then went back home, and later that evening were watching the news to see how the report turned out, and they had completely distorted the information and had brought in an astronomer who, I suppose, tried to disprove everything.
Well, it was only a few miles from Jodrell Bank, that particular ring was the Jodrell Bank telescope. And what they did was consult someone at Jodrell Bank about what his thoughts were about this ring. And because they had heard my version of what it was, and I said, well, that hasn't been produced by a roller or anything like that. That has been produced that ring has been produced very carefully and very, very gently. And other things that were in the wheat, it was a wheat field, were in fact bent as well, like weedy potatoes. So they could not possibly have used a roller or to produce that pattern. And a woman who had reported it was in fact amateur astronomer, archaeologist.
Right.
And she and her friends, archaeologist friends, did a detailed survey of that corner of the field to get the true shape of this thing, this ring. It was in a very lumpy part of it, in a hollow in the field, in fact. And they'd come up with this planned view, and the man from the BBC saw this as well, a planned view of the site, which was nothing like a circle. It hadn't been produced by someone putting a peg in the ground and going round it. I then did a projection into the horizontal plane from that sloping field, and well, it was a circle, perfect circle, relative to the original. So this pointed to the fact that this had been projected as a circle into a very lumpy sloping field. Mm-hmm. And I had explained all this to the interviewer, and he had said, well, when it came on the screen, they'd interviewed a young fellow at Jodrell Bank Telescope, who was actually an astrophysicist, I would think, probably, and asked him what he thought. And he said, well, we scientists just think it's a whirlwind that comes down on the ground and puts it down. Mm-hmm. Well, really, and as I've related in the book, they said, well, but our researchers, I think our researchers would like to think of something more spectacular or something like that. I've written down what they actually said. So they were making fun of us, you see.
Yes, yes.
They were saying we were a couple of loonies.
Yeah. Because
we had this view that this was something very odd, very remarkable.
And that's been what you've been. You have been up against this throughout the whole research, throughout the time you have been doing this research for many decades now, is this constant fight that you've had to overcome to get this information out to the right people. I mean, you also give a story where you were asked by a leading publisher to write down, all of your information, your theory, and write it down into a manuscript, which you did, and then it ended up being shelved, didn't it? Because they had dismissed, this was going into crop circles now, they had dismissed the whole crop circle phenomenon, tried to make it sound as if it was all a hoax, and then found a reason not to publish your work. So
because those two fellows from Southampton had said they'd done them all, you see, and the press had a field day with that and decided that was the answer. So after that, the public followed that hook, line, and sinker, and the publishers said, well, we haven't got a market really. So. That's the way it's been, really.
Yeah, that seems to be the official line, isn't it? They're continuously trying to make this kind of information be make-believe, be something that's in people's imagination. But when the information is presented, like how you presented in your book, there's just so many case studies, and you haven't even listed... You've only listed a few, really, in the book. But there's just so much information, not to mention all of the accounts from the men in the military who have had encounters. That alone is quite phenomenal. All of the different stories that men, pilots, military men, what have you, their experiences. But yet, in the public sphere, in 2011, we're still trying to get people to take a look and see that this is something much bigger than, it's in your imagination, or that you didn't see that. It goes much further than that.
Yes.
But you still carry forward anyway, don't you? You're still trying to carry on with your research and your work. It doesn't make you stop. But how do you feel about all of that? I mean, with all of your years of research.
Well, I mean, I just had to do it, basically. I was not trying to make money by writing books about it or anything like that. I wanted to get to the bottom of these mysteries. That's the sort of man I am. I want to understand things. And so I'm prepared to go into areas where angels fear to tread.
Yeah.
There's something I'd like to mention. before we go off air, and that is, I think I mentioned it, I might have mentioned it last time, but there was a wonderful close encounter in Daventry, outside Daventry, 1978, which was involved an experienced teacher, or a member of the teaching profession, Mrs. Elsie Olkinson.
Mm-hmm.
And she lost time going home one evening on November 22nd, 1978. And under hypnosis, she sort of got the impression that she had been abducted. Now, and she became very involved with it after that, and quite well known, I think. She was on television quite a lot. But the thing that the object she actually encountered initially was a dumbbell-shaped thing,
mm-hmm.
hovering low over the A5 main road, which is part of her route home. And when she turned off for her village, she noticed that it was still there and flashing a light. And then she experienced some very strange things, including the car playing up and all that sort of thing, which became quite commonplace. But that's fairly close to where you are in Peterborough.
Yeah.
And I've been in touch, or I've been only recently got to know about the work of an ex-policeman called John Hanson and his co-author Dawn Holloway, who have been producing a series of books to produce an encyclopedia of British UFOs.
Oh, right, okay.
And he sent me a copy of volume 1 of his book, which was 1940 to 1959, and in it I discovered there was a dumbbell case, another dumbbell sighting,
mm-hmm.
this time off Wales, off Cardiff Airport, over the Bristol Channel, opposite Cardiff Airport. And I ran that case, and I ran the other one, and I found that they had commonalities. And it looks as if they might have been, doing the same things, only one in 1954 over the south coast of Wales there, and another one in the eastern Daventry area in 1978.
Mm-hmm.
So there are exercises of this kind that we need to be doing,
Yeah.
There's so much.
It's a very deep subject, more so than what people can even fathom, to be honest.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And I've discovered, there are links between the sites of close encounter CE4s, for example, and with the path linking those major sites of activity.
Yeah.
And this is just too much for one person to handle,
And this is why you do use the word monitoring, because those above have been monitoring us through their exercises, and I guess this is why we had so many technical difficulties in the last show and in this show, because you found out their secret. And they don't like it. I don't think they like that. We figured it out, that they have a flight pattern, that they're looking at certain locations, they have timings, we're knowing those secrets.
Yes.
But, well, unfortunately, Roy, we've run out of time. Time just seems to go... it just goes so quickly when we're talking.
Yes.
I'm going to have to get you back next year, because we're running... this is going to be... we're going to have one last show before the end of the year. So I will have you back next year, and we'll continue on, because you've done other research. There's crop circle research as well for us to get into.
There is so much here.
There's so
I
much.
Don't really know where to stow it all.
I know. But you deserve a lot more time than what you were given tonight. But I am aware of the time, and I don't want to cut you off.
I'm very grateful for your interest in it all. Thank you.
But thank you for joining us again this evening, and we'll have you back. And regardless of the technical gremlins, we're going to make it through.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, goodbye then.
Okay, so that's it, guys. So, I want to thank all of you for listening tonight. We've had some technical difficulties, but it's been a good show. And, well, I'll be back not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after that. And until then, keep your eyes on the stars.